A YouTuber here with the ASW-28 by Volantex. We're doing our build series. Just got done with the LEDs. We just did a simple tail light and red and green nav lights on the wings. And we're just getting ready to put together the tail. So only complication with the lights is that we have some wires here. Now on the wings you're not even going to know because they're going to be exactly like any other wing to install. But on this we'll have to be careful to have clearance for this wire that goes out to the LED bank in the back here. So the other thing is when we're done we'll probably want to tape these or glue these together with the control surface so we don't have issues there. So real quick what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just take a look at the way this works. Is that this sandwich is in here and then that holds the wing, the vertical stabilizer, and then the horizontal stabilizer goes on top of all that. So my past experience with this plane is that it's I'm having trouble remembering, to be honest, if it's easier to put all the tape and stuff on everything first, but being that I know we have to get the control surfaces, we might as well go ahead and put our control horns on. Obviously in this video we'll go ahead and get the rudder and the vertical stabilizer taken care of. So we might as well get these put on now, and they're pretty straightforward. Basically have 4 screws that go through the control horn, and then the same as most control horns, you're going to basically feed them through so that at the end of the day your controls are lined up over the hinge, or as close as you can reasonably get that. So I would encourage you to get those in before you assemble everything. Otherwise they'll be a lot harder to put together once everything is assembled. In particular this one, because it would be upside down. Okay, and then there's the backer plate, just like with the ailerons. And this backer plate is just going to receive the screws from the other side. So it's very simple to get these things put together. I had a problem with one of them that I did, I think, off film or off camera, where the screws didn't want to bite in their square. So it kind of did some weird stuff where they wanted to twist the control arm really bad. So maybe it's easier to just get these started first so that we can maintain proper alignment. That means we'd have to start all 4 screws. I kind of just paused the video so you didn't have to watch me do it, but I want you guys to see, if I run into that problem again, I want you to see how I can deal with it. Because you see, it's kind of hard to get those things lined up at first. But once you're down to the 4th one, if you haven't tightened them all, you do have quite a bit of play still. And incidentally, this screwdriver came with the kit, which is pretty cool, because it actually works really good for this size of screw. Some of these, they are really junky screws. The screws on this plane were actually pretty decent. But you get into these in-between sizes. So basically we'll tighten those down, and there should be some excess sticking out the top. Not sure why I was so concerned with that on the first build, but I went and tried to grind them off. I think it's mostly a looks thing, but you know, it's not that critical. It's not that big a deal. Maybe on the wings it's a little bit more critical than on this, because you'll be more likely to have those drag along something because they're so big. Okay, so now that we've got those 4 screws mostly tight, you can kind of come back over here and you can see which one needs some more attention, because this has been molded in such a way that you should hypothetically have the same amount of threads exposed on each of these screws. So you can just kind of figure out which one's in the furthest and then screw them all in the same amount. And there you have it. You have a nice, really sturdy. Now you'll notice I didn't redo these hinges, not on the elevator and rudder. I felt that the rudder and elevator were strong. They were stronger. And I felt like the amount of freedom was plenty good. On the ailerons, there just wasn't enough material to make for a strong connection mechanically. Now this side's really, you can put it on backwards, so make sure you're paying attention and you've got your servo on the side you're going to screw this one into. And this one drops all the way down in to the surface because of the thickness of the rudder. And so that does help a little bit in terms of alignment of the screws. So I'll probably go ahead and pause it at this point. Okay, so while I'm running these screws in, I just want to talk to you a little bit about a control authority on the elevator, rudder, and on the ailerons. As with many planes, there's going to be a specified amount of deflection. And I'm not 100% sure if they even specified in this one. And here's why I'm going to tell you why I don't care. Because I want the maximum amount of deflection that I can get away with on any plane I fly. And why that comes up so much for me, and it may not for some of you, is that I really push the envelope on slow flight. Okay, now I want to show you that control arm is hitting. It's digging into the foam right there. So now there's a couple different ways you can resolve this. If I recall on mine the first time, I went ahead and cut that last hole, but that was probably not the best maneuver. What would be better is to relieve a little bit of this material, and what that will do is that will give us more flexibility to bring more control authority out of the rudder. Okay? And why is that important? Well, we were just talking about that. The reason it's important is because when you're going slow, then you're going to want to have more deflection for the same amount of control authority, because there's less airflow going across the control surface at that given time. So suppose you were going twice as fast. Well, hypothetically, you would need to deflect the rudder half as much. Now, it's not a linear change. There's other forces and variables that come into consideration for that. Now, I want to show you one other thing. You can see that we're clear, but we're, by the time we have the control arm on there and everything, we may have to further adjust that, but it's going to be a lot harder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'll just use the butt end of this knife. So we'll get that hot. And this is the part where I'm going to forget about it and burn myself so everybody can laugh. Okay, so you don't need it super hot, just need a little bit of heat. But I do want it pretty hot on one side. I think it's getting pretty toasty. Okay, so now I'm just going to let that sit on the table and not touch it, because I'm going to totally get burned. Okay, so got the control arm in there. Ooh, actually, we need a couple more turns on that. The inside holes didn't get quite as much penetration, and they're going to be very jealous of the other screws that got more penetration. Anyway, all right, so here we go. These are numbered channel 2 and channel 4. Okay, that's if you had a ready to fly, I guess. I don't know that they know. Oh, that says channel 3 and this one says channel 2. That's always convenient. So it's kind of like, well, your guess is good as mine. Why they would do that? That's so stupid. So this one says channel 4 and this one says channel 4. So I'm assuming at least one of them was right. The process of elimination leads us to the fact that one of those is right and one of those is wrong. But what we'll do is we'll plug it in quick and we'll just get a baseline for what it looks like. Now, obviously, we've got these controls that are going to go in. And you do want to use these little rubber things that are included. In fact, you want to use better ones if you can. they go over and then they'll keep things from popping off. But I'll actually go back later and add those. You'll also notice I pulled these out, and I'll explain later. That's a Y cable for the ailerons and then a Y cable for the flaps. So if you were to run this thing bone stock, then what would happen is you would have those Y cables coming out to the wings. Well, I'm not going to have those because I only have one Y cable, and it's going to be for the flaps. The ailerons are treated as separate channels. Okay, so next thing we got to do is turn on our radio system. Power it on, make sure the throttle cut's on. This piece of heat shrink, we can use that on another project. Okay, so we got the correct model pulled up. So we're going to plug in the battery, which is going to energize the receiver. And channels 2 and 4 or 3 and 4 or whatever it is should start working. So the first thing we want to do is just double check for the elevator. And I can barely see, but I know you guys probably can't see. So the elevator's up here, right? Yep, it's moving. Can't say which direction it's moving because there's your rudder. Okay, so we know that we haven't plugged in right. So at this point would be the time when we'd want to go ahead and glue those things in. And what I've learned is that when you glue a control surface in, you can use CA and it works well, but it's a lot harder to get off later. This thing is still really hot, jeez. How is that thing still hot? That's nuts. I did that a long time ago, it feels like. So once the glue is hot, we'll go ahead and just put a strip of glue. Nothing too heavy. And then we'll actually take those two and we'll just squish them together like that. Okay? And then we'll guide those in, and it's going to be a done deal. So that's the way we're going to do that. And while we wait, we'll go ahead and get the control arms, because we have to wait for the hot glue gun to get warm. We got two of these controls. Now, interestingly enough, two of them came cut and two of them came uncut. Now, if somebody can explain to me why they gave two that weren't cut and two that were cut, I think I understand the rationale behind one of them being cut, because it's possible somebody may want to do, like a pull system for a rudder, where this would go up here and you would need both. But I don't understand the rationale behind that. So it always makes me nervous when manufacturers send things like this where it's ambiguous. Like nobody knows exactly why they did it. So I'm just going to use my brain and figure that they just screwed something up. So we'll go ahead and clip those. And I will keep those, believe it or not, because of my hoarding tendencies. And also from the tendency to know that you need that sort of thing all the time. Kind of like what I did on my ailerons. Go ahead and take this grinder, run it on low speed, smooth the edges over. Okay. You notice I'm not, getting out some like measuring tape and making sure it's exactly even and all that. I don't care that much. It's not that critical. And then since we're working over here, we'll just grab the hot glue gun and bring it with us. And I've smelled it. It doesn't smell particularly hot, which is always a bad sign. Almost like it's not working. But it's getting warm. Someday it'll be hot. Okay, so we have one of these things done. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that this has to have a hole large enough to receive this control, and clearly it's not. So the second step we'll have to do while that glue gun very slowly comes up to temperature. So we have to switch bits from our last drill. We have to put in this. This is usually what I do, is I just hold them up like that. Very slightly bigger. And then I use something to hold up against okay, and I do that. But Brian, won't that rip out? Probably at some point, especially after a crash. So to answer your question, yes, but it's going to be a sacrificial lamb in our case. So I want it to break if it's going to break. And if it's not going to break, then all the better. Okay, so this is going to be for our rudder. And you're probably wondering why I'm doing this now instead of waiting. Now, one thing I really like about this kit is look at that relief cut. They actually thought about needing to put the screws in here, which to me seems pretty stinking obvious. Like, you've got a plane, you've got a servo, you're going to have to get to it. So why not have access? Well, 9 times out of 10, there isn't access, and so you have to make your own. Now, I'll be honest with you, that slit, I could do it a lot nicer than they did, because I would just take and heat up the screwdriver and just dive it into the foam at the exact angle I want. But they did a nice job. I mean, it's accessible. So now, I'm just getting a rough adjustment made here. Obviously, the servo is centered. Okay. Oh, geez, I put it way too far out. Why did I go so far out? Okay. So what we're looking for is kind of line this up about like that. Nope. Okay, got to go a little bit more. Geez, I totally went the wrong way, didn't I? And need a little bit more. Probably 1 or 2 more. Or 2.5 more. Alright, so now this is going to go to... Actually, I want this on the other side of the control arm. Yes, much better alignment there. So now I can just pop this on. And remember, we're not trying to do this so that it could never come apart again, because we're going to have to take it apart just to put those little collar things on. But what I'm trying to do is verify that we can get enough freedom to even utilize this whole sweep at the furthest hole, meaning the most inside and the most outside. That's going to give you the most output from the controls. Rudder. Look at that, guys. That'll work. Now, we're not quite perfectly centered either, so I need to actually pop that off. I'm just trying to think this through. I want to shorten it, so I'm going to screw this in. Half a screw. Oh no, we're not going to be able to do that, are we? I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. If we do that, I'll have to take this off and put it back on the other way, which is fine. Just pull it off and stick it right back on the wrong way. And since it's on the wrong way, it'll help us to remember to tighten. Perfect. I'm sure that probably made no sense to you guys at home. It's alright. There are certain things you won't have to understand. Not exactly perfectly square, but I don't think we're going to get enough out of the next... well, maybe I can do it this way. Maybe. Ooh, that actually might be what we needed. So now we just need to pop this off. If that was what we needed, then we'll come back out 1/2 a turn, and that should be about right. Make sure we're totally perpendicular to the square, and then throw that through. See, now we're going the other way. See, there's a certain point where you just realize you're kind of in between the steps, and I think that's where we are on this. No big deal, that's what electronic trim is for. Perfect, guys, and I'm smelling the hot glue gun finally. Okay, so we'll grab that. Remember, we're trying to make this so that they don't come apart easily, not so they don't come apart ever, because there may come a time when we want to go ahead and pull this apart. Okay, so we'll go a little bit heavier on that one, and we'll just stick them together, just like this. Okay, so what that's going to do for us is preferably make it a little easier to load in there. Geez, that dried really quick. If you get hot glue that dries like that really fast, that's usually an indication that it wasn't hot enough to begin with. So try it again. Much better. Now we're just going to let that sit for a second while we're holding it. Alright, cool. That's good enough now. So now I'm not going to do any more. I'm not going to tape it anymore. I'm not going to do anything because there's no control rods going through the length of the fuse. So we should be totally safe on that. And so our next step is to just kind of drop this down in. And I'm probably going to kick myself for gluing those together already. I hope not, but I might. Okay, so now we just need to be careful of our antennas on this thing. And the two that go all the way up front. Let's push the wire in first for the LED on the tail light. Okay, so we'll drop that into the hole and just very gently tug it up front. And then one's going to be a little bit longer than the other. So we'll grab whichever one that is. That's weird. What the heck? Oh, it's because they're glued together. So we'll just try to stuff that down in there. And then the next thing we can do is we'll go ahead and get this bottom in there. Now, if I recall, there is a correct way and an incorrect way on this, and I just can't remember on that. We move this out of the way for now. We'll be needing that shortly, so we'll leave that hot. Let's flip the plane on its side. Okay, so we'll just try to drop that in there. We're hitting all wire. Just can't tell which one. Looks like we're getting two of them. That's always doubly excitement. There it goes. Now, my first one I had to trim this piece. So I won't be surprised if that happens again, but I'll be a little bit more prepared. Let's stick the screwdriver. You see how that kind of pops up into that hole there? I'm just double checking for proper fit, make sure there's not a forward and a backward. I didn't think there was. I don't think there is. I still don't think there is. It's possible they might have fixed the little glitch that I had on mine, the first one. Let's look for the gap. This is where I had a glitch. Do you guys see that? We have a tight fit here. On my first one, I had to take material off of those to get it to suck in tight. So as far as I'm concerned, it's good. So there's some triangular screws here. Or triangular, what am I trying to say? These screws. There's 5 of them, and we need 4 of them. So they must have given us an extra. Or, better said, they did give us an extra. So grab the screwdriver. And what we have to do is just screw a screw into here, which thusly will pull down on the rudder. I keep saying rudder, and I mean vertical stabilizer. The rudder assembly, if you will. Now the other ones will be used on the top to hold the horizontal stabilizer. Now look, we trimmed this here for extra clearance, and it doesn't look like we really needed it to be trimmed. But I don't think we really hurt it. I don't think we really hurt anything either. Oops. So we'll see how this goes. Can't speak for anybody else, but this screwdriver is a little on the small side for this, because you do have a little bit of torque you need to put on these, since it's into a plastic piece. Let's see. I highly encourage you to push it down before you tighten these screws, because you can actually pull that plastic together in the wrong position. Okay? Yeah, baby. That's pretty good. I'm really happy with that. Compared to my first one, I did not have such good luck on the first one for that. Okay, let's look. Oh, I love it. Oh, that's so cool. I love the virgin control surface test. All right, so now the next thing, let's go ahead and might as well at this point get this one done. Do the same thing. Cut it like that. Lay it aside. Trim it a little bit. Rough trim it, and then we'll go ahead and use the grinder. So guys, kind of the moral of the story is on this plane is you can spend a whole lot more time putting this thing together than you have to. But that doesn't mean you have to. You could just do this thing, you know, just totally stock, and it would have been a good plane. But if you want to do it like I'm doing it, I think you'll end up with a really good plane. Okay? And so that's your call. Now, the elevator, I'm not as excited about if there were a failure on this control surface. And so having that enlarged a little bit there does make me somewhat nervous. But I'm probably just going to have to get over it. I want to show you what I'm talking about here, but it requires the camera to cooperate. There you go. You see what I'm talking about? There's just not really that much material there. And there's ways to reinforce that. You could take a piece of wire and wrap it around and then CA it on there. But I just honestly, I don't think it's worth the effort. You're more likely to burn up the servo. Now I want to show you another cool thing. Look, there's a hole. Isn't that smart, guys? You know how often you have access to things like this? Okay, elevator. Oh, it's so cool. It's even going the right way. Awesome. We'll try it again in focus this time. It's even going the right way, guys. That is really cool. And we've got it nice and square right now. So we've got our last adjustment to make, our last rough adjustment. So we'll just try it like that first. And we'll dry fit this. I mean, it's going to be a dry fit anyway. It's held on by screws. Now, you'll notice one issue here, and I remember this issue. And that is, when I go to stick this onto my control, you see what's going on? It's got this nasty steep angle now. As a result, you're going to really put a lot of pressure on this connector. So I am going to pull this out a little bit yet, because I want it to be in that top hole. Don't need to go that much, actually. Probably like 2 turns, or maybe 1.5. Okay, so there's 1.5. Let's see if I can reach to the innermost hole. Now the innermost hole, the significance of the innermost hole is that well, before I do that, let's be smart fellers and not fart smellers. We have to put the screw in this one at this point. So let's drop that in there and grab a screw. Now there's I think 6 of these we have to do. 1 for each of the control surfaces. So you'll want to make sure you get those done at some point. Now I don't want to lose this screw, okay? And this is magnetically attached, I believe, a little bit. But I want a stronger magnet because I don't want it to fall off and get lost somewhere weird. So I'm just going to feed it through like this. Oh, you son of a gun. Yes. Yes. Okay, so now that it's in there, we can put that down. That servo is so pissed at me as I'm tightening that. Okay, very good. So now what we'll do while we've got this off, being that this one is going to be a little harder to get back into that tight spot, we'll go ahead and feed one of these over from the back. we'll just spin it until it gets up onto the lip, like that, or the ledge. And then we'll go to the innermost connection point, plop it on there, and then slip this down a wee bit. Okay? That's going to help it to not come undone. And then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to take 2 pairs of pliers. We're going to bend this thing. Okay, so we'll just hold it at an angle. And we'll bend it. And then if I got it right, I'll be happy. I'm not really going to be surprised if I got it wrong. Especially even a little bit wrong. Okay? Drop that in. And shoot this right onto the little adapters there. Oh yeah, baby! See, it still wants to pull it up at the end of the stroke. You see that? That side's doing the opposite though. So we're kind of in the we're in the middle of that battle. So really what would be ideal is a ball joint. You know, something that would allow that to not be a factor. Or better yet, have the servo